Good evening, Namaskar, Adab, and a very warm welcome to all our viewers this afternoon. It's a great pleasure to welcome you back to the BaithakUK conversation series, which is called My Life, My Art. We've had some very interesting sessions, and I know a lot of you are here interested and looking forward to the conversation this afternoon with writer director Shonali Bose. I'd first of all like to acknowledge thanks to our branding partners, our marketing partners. It's been delightful to have London Indian Film Festival, LIF, joining us, also Munch UK and Sangeet Foundation. The last, Sangeet Foundation, works with mental health and music and the arts. So it's a diverse group of organizations who have come together, all with their interest in Shonali and her works. I will not take any much longer. We would like to call in Shonali Bose now and start our conversation. Hi, Shonali.
Hi, Sangeeta.
I'm so pleased that you've joined us for this session and for this series. And I haven't gone into some sort of long drawn introduction to you simply because we will be talking through your life and your art as we go along. So very warm welcome.
Yeah, thrilled to be here on this series. I know there's a couple of there's my childhood best friend who I know her from when I was 5 years old. She's listening in, Gayatri Bose, and I feel there might be some other school friends from Loreto. So
yes, I know there's a huge group of Lorettites who've been activated. So you have childhood friends and perhaps college friends from Miranda House. All sorts of groups have gone activated. I'm so excited because then they connect to you at different times of your life. Yes, I can see Gayatri saying hello. I can see Pulchuri, Indrani, and various other people. And we will be taking questions. So guys, please type in your questions as they come along. And as we go through this conversation, we will talk for a bit and then we will open up with the questions. So I'd like to start with you, Shonali. I think let's just do a bit of chronological walk over here and start with your early years. As I know, you grew up or had your early childhood in Kolkata and then spent time in Delhi. So during that time, what was your interest? As a child, what were your interests? Did you really think right from the beginning that you were going to be in theater and in films, or were there other creative interests that you had?
I didn't think I would at all be in film, actually, but theater was a big thing of my life. I was always doing plays from a young age, even from class 3, etc. I used to do skits and do little plays in Loreto, and loved that. I loved directing as well as, acting in those plays. I remember in class 5, we did Little Women and I was Jo. I just feel so connected with the Little Women when I watch the film because of passionately directing it and acting in it. And so I think theater was something I felt would be a hobby, and it was. As, I even went to America. So theater was something as a passion to act on stage. I love that. I still love it. I never dreamt I would direct film, actually. I thought a profession, I would probably be either a writer or a teacher. I think I was very drawn to teaching. I love teaching. And I think that's sort of where I thought I would end up in my life.
Right. So when you were in Delhi, you were also involved with activism. I mean, from your student days, you've been part of politics and activism. And I guess that was the time for the anti-Sikh riots, which you witnessed and you worked on the field for that. So did that sort of change your attitude towards life and about the relationship between social change or social commentary and the creative arts?
So actually, my passion for social justice, I would say, began in early childhood. I remember even my first words were probably Lenin Mama Zindabad. Like I grew up very influenced by my Mashi, Brinda Karat, a communist leader. And so I just grew up with those values. My father, he became a Shonnashi later in life, but my father also really imbued, and my mother too, she worked with with disabled kids at that time called spastic. So I think that sense of thinking about less privileged people in society was imbued in me at a very, very young age. So in Kolkata, we used to do, every one, in a week, we would go and feed the poor. So there are pictures of me even as a 5-year-old holding a big balti and feeding people. And, or for instance, like in our house, and this is a film I'm doing right now that I've just written during COVID, about the relationship of a woman and her working class, her staff, which has become sort of quite a big issue during COVID. But I think from a young age, I used to always go and sit in my Didi's Kole in the kitchen. Like I used to want to sit and eat with her, and I used to find it terrible that why couldn't she sit at the dining table and eat with us? So I think my heart always lay with the dispossessed, with the working class, and that became formalized. Before actually Delhi, I was actually after Calcutta, I went to Bombay. When I was 14 in class 8, I left Kolkata and we moved to Bombay. And after Bombay, I went to the Lawrence School, Sanar. So I remember even at that time, even though Sanar was a very sort of elite boarding school, I was always raising issues of social justice at that time also. I was sort of firebrand, known for that. So when I went to Delhi, so in my undergrad in Miranda House, everything became formalized. I, stood for student union elections. I was general secretary. I was running things. I was active, but also at the same time in drama and debate. So the cultural side never went down. So I was also the secretary of the Dramatic Society, Debating Society, but also of overall politics. Like I felt really strongly that, we are privileged, and, you can't just be here in an elite institution just having your own little life and your own little education. Like you need to do stuff for other people. Right. So I think that was something that defined my college life. And 1984 Carnage was one of those things, working in the relief camps, being very impacted by what I saw in the relief camps. Bhopal gas tragedy, another thing, like big political things happened at that time. And I was very much a part of their Mandal commission. Like, so really big things happened during when I was in college, actually. And it was a time when there were, it was not that I'm some, person who sort of brought that. I think it was the atmosphere. It was a very political time that, and I was part of that political process, the environment.
And did coming from a Bengali family have something to do with that? This whole combination of
communism and Shonnashi. I mean, if you look at it, like, whether you're a Shonnashi or you're communist, like that love for the poor, that Sheba that comes from our culture. I mean, definitely, I feel coming from Bengal has a big part of it. I mean, I am from a progressive political Bengali family. All Bengali families are not, but definitely I feel like, I mean, Kolkata itself as a city, like that's why I was saying my roots of my revolutionary ideology and feelings come from the city that I was born and brought up in, as well as from my family.
Right. So while you were doing theatre and activism, what took you for your studies abroad? Were you planning that, or did that happen?
Never. I actually would have ended up doing my PhD at JNU and being a teacher. But my mother died very tragically in my final year in Miranda House. And she was very young. She was actually a very brilliant, well-known theatre actor, and she lived in Bombay. I was in hostel in Miranda House, and it was hospital negligence in Nanavati Hospital here in Juhu, where Amitabh Bachchan right now is. In fact, it was really interesting because when we moved to Bombay, and she always said that he's a good friend of hers, and we were like, yeah, right, he's a good friend of yours, and we just made fun and didn't believe her. And once we were going home in the car from school, and there was a Bachchan shoot going on. I'm digressing just for a quick moment because it's such a funny story. And then my mother's like, oh, look. And my sister and I are rolling eyes and saying, yeah, right. She's just going to be caught out right now. And then we get out of the car and we go to watch this shoot. And then he stops shooting, and then he sees, and he's like, Junie, like that. And he went and hugged my mother, and we were just, our eyes were popping out, and then chairs were brought for us, and we were given Camphor Cola. Camphor Cola was the drink at the time. And we watched the shoot, and then he came over to the house after that. But anyway, so, it's so funny because when he almost died, I remember her really praying and just being so worried about it. And then when she was dying, he came and he sat with us in the ICU. And, because they had a friendship from college, from Delhi University days, and they used to act in theater a lot. So it was a really lovely side to see that of somebody as big as Mr. Bachchan. But coming back to what I was saying is that Nanavati Hospital, it was complete medical negligence. I felt like it was murder, and I wanted to go to the London. I wanted to go and study law in London and become a lawyer, and just because I wanted justice for my mother, and if anything like this happened to anybody else. But I didn't. I got into LSC, but I didn't get funding, and I really needed to leave the country. I just was feeling so angry with what happened, and I got funding to Columbia University for political science. I was not interested in that. At that point, I really wanted to be a lawyer. But that's what I had money for, the PhD in political science. And I think I just needed to leave India. And so that's why after my bachelor's, I went to Columbia University. And actually, had I not gone there, I wouldn't have been a filmmaker. Because as I said, if I'd stayed in India, I'd have gone to JNU and I would have happily done a PhD in history. But because I went to Columbia, I discovered that I really disliked their PhD program and their entire approach to India. So for me, I was very connected, as I said, to social justice. So for instance, in political science, I would take up subjects like the Naxalbari movement or the Telangana uprising of the peasants. And for me, I was taking it up not just with academic interest, but also just looking at movements that my country had and where we are at. Like, where are we after independence? What is happening to the majority of people? Like, why have revolutions failed? Like, why are the majority of people still mired in abject poverty and distress, right? Mm-hmm. And their approach was third world development. You're looking at the third world from the advantage of being in the first world and looking at the development in the third world. So I just found it really reactionary and conservative. So even though I had funding for 7-year PhD, I quit after my master's. And at that time, my Mashi and Misho, Radhika and Pranay Roy, they were just about 40 at that time. They came to do a 6-week course at NYU because they, like my Misho was in fact in the finance ministry at that time, and he was, economist, and my Mashi had been with India Today. So they had no television experience, but they just had this exciting idea at the age of 40 that they're going to start a news program and launch something in television. And as you know, at that time, we just had Doordarshan in India. So it was quite a radical thing for them to embark on this. So they came to do the 6-week course at NYU. And I acted in that course. My Mashi was doing the course and I just acted in an exercise that she did. And I just found it really interesting and cool. So after they left, I saved up all my babysitting money and I just did the same course. Just in my free time, I did that course. Right. And in doing that course, I was behind the camera instead of being in front of the camera. And I was just like, wow, I really, really love this. So this is all because actually I had left my master's at Columbia University. Otherwise, I wouldn't have changed academics. I changed my stream from being in academics to film because of that. And so I did this course and then I was like, wow, this is really cool. And, maybe this is something that I might want to do. So I applied to film school. And while I was waiting to hear from film school, I worked at a National Lawyers Guild because I still had this interest in law. And while I was working there, I discovered that I felt disillusioned because I realized that you're so limited by the legal process that can you really get justice in the kind of justice that I wanted? And I felt that maybe cinema is a way that I can better express my views and my feelings, whether it's on gender, or whether sexuality, or whether poverty or class differences. Like maybe that's a better route for me. So when I got into film school, if I had not got funding again, I would be back in India being a teacher, as I say. But I did get funding to UCLA Film School, one of the top film schools, and that's it. I went there, I directed my first short film, and I was like, at that time, I was 29, and I was like, wow, this is my calling. I literally felt it in my bones. I felt it in the, flow of the blood in my veins. I was like, wow, I just love directing. I just love creating something out of nothing. And I realized, oh, this is my calling. And I didn't know till I was 29 that was my calling, because honestly, I had never dreamt of being a filmmaker.
Right. So how did Amu happen? First the book and the film.
Yeah, so the book didn't come first. The book came way later. So basically, Amu, so I graduated from film school with a documentary called Lifting the Veil I had not done, the narrative track. I'd gone into documentary track, and I did Lifting the Veil. And then I had both my children, Ishan and Vivan, while I was in film school. So when I was in first year film school, I was pregnant, and we didn't want to be pregnant at that time. But then we weren't. We decided, okay, there's never a good time to really be pregnant, and we're gonna have this baby. But in the film school, I was the first person ever in the history of the UCLA Film School as a mother to be pregnant and then to have a child. Like, men had been fathers, but never a woman, because it's a really tough, rigorous production program where you're in production, from morning to night. So that's extremely challenging, but there was no option. So I remember, like, even things like while I'm pregnant, and then I had a dreadful pregnancy. I was sick, I think, throughout the 9 months. I would just keep me throwing up. And everybody in my class were like 20 something and younger than me, and mostly male. And it was a huge, like, dramatic event for them. It wasn't par for the course. It was like the class would stop, and I would be running to the bathroom, and somebody would come running with me, and I'd be throwing up. And it was just so funny. And then when I had Ishan, after 2 weeks, I had to get back to school because I was on a TA-ship, and so I couldn't. That was financing me, and so I had to go back. So I was just 2 weeks out, and so Ishan was just attached to my body like this, and I'd go and I'd have to teach a class, and then suddenly he'd want to be fed, and I would just like pop out my breast and put it and going, and there would just be pin drop silence, and people just in shock because they've never experienced this. Because unlike India, where we see working class people breastfeed, so we're used to the sight of breastfeeding, even if the middle class doesn't do it publicly.
Yeah.
But in America, it's not a common sight. So that on the bus I'm doing it, and I'm doing it in the middle of the class. Like, it was very radical. Anyway, so Ishan grew up in the film school. Vivan was born in my final year of film school. So it was quite a challenge. And when I graduated with the two of them, I was fully immersed in being a mother. Like, many of you are in London, or probably most of you listening are in London. You know how it is, like, to be a mother abroad. Like, it's a nightmare. How long can your parents or your in-laws come and stay with you, right? So it's so difficult. It's so difficult to have children when one is living abroad, and to have two of them. I was just like, this is not double. It's like 4 times. So much. So for the first 2 years after film school, I was just immersed in being a mother. And after those 2 years, then I felt really terrified that, can I even make a film? I felt I'd forgotten everything I learned in film school, and I won't be able to direct a film. And I was like, what should I do? What should I do? And it came back to me that I need to just do, why did I become a filmmaker? And so, what is it that speaks to me the most? And it is political things. And so I remember that what my experience was in 1984, working in the camps, and no one had made a film on that subject. And I was like, look, it's going to be so hard to make a film, any film, even a romantic comedy, like, because of these two children, and it's just impossible. So then if it's impossible, you can just be even more impossible. Like, if it's just, that much more impossible, and you go all the more impossible, that just didn't seem, it's actually nuts. But it's a Herculean thing to take on the genocide and try to make a film on that as your first film. But I just was in that flow of, things being impossible, and I'm a mother, and I'm just going to do whatever it takes. And, it doesn't matter that I have two children. And I just said, doesn't matter that this is so tough, I'm going to do it. And so I decided then I am going to make a film about 84. And then I decided, but I won't make a documentary, even though that was my training, because I said, then it'll just be watched by human rights activists and the Sikh victims and people who feel, survivors who feel strongly about it. I said, I won't be able to access and reach audiences who don't know about it, whose minds I want to change and influence. So I said, I need to make a feature narrative film that will just tug at your heart and just go into you and grab you, and just shake you up and make you think about something that you didn't want to think about or didn't know about. And so then I had to, come up with this real big challenge of writing a script, and it was really hard. Children were, really small. Vivan was a baby, and Ishan was 4. And in between taking care of them, I would just keep writing and rewriting, and I just stuck with it, and I just moved. And that's actually, we didn't get any funding for this film. It was really difficult. And the first money that came was the children's money by the time I started making it. This is Konkona, and this is Ali Abad Zafar Zaidi, who's really famous now. He made a film called Sultan, and he's made, I think, that he's made some really big films, Tiger Zinda Hai and all that. He was my assistant during our move, and Coco had just Coco had not become big at all. I went to Apurna Mashi's house. She used to live in New Alipur as my neighbor. And she loved me coming over because her older daughter, Donna, used to love playing with me, and she was very shy and I was very outgoing. And so Apurna Mashi would say, let Shonali, you come. And she would tell her daughter, Donna, just, she really wanted her to be like me. So I just looked up. I used to sit there while she's sitting in front of the mirror and putting makeup. And I used to just look at her with big eyes. It was unbelievable. So when I was doing Amu, I went to offer her the role of the mother, which actually then got played by my Mashi. So I said, Apurna Mashi, I've written this is my first film. I really want you to be in it. And she heard it and everything. And she said, Nare, I needed film I direct. I'm directing my own film now, so I won't be able to act. But she said, who's playing the young girl? I said, well, I'm casting an Indian American because the character is Indian American. So she really needs to have the accent and the body language of somebody Indian American. And I really think I can cast an Indian actor to play it. And Konkona walked past the room and she said, no, my younger one, Konkona, Khoob bhalo re, she's really good at accents. And in my head, I was just like, this is so embarrassing. I've come to ask her to act in my film and she's pushing her daughter on me. This is just mortifying. And I was like, Hacha, chika, yeah, okay, yeah, lovely, wonderful and all. And I just ran from there. And then like a year passed. Yeah. So in that year, I auditioned 100 Indian American actors to play the role of Kaju. There were three finalists and they were really good. But I wasn't crazy about them. And I was home in India because I used to come every summer and winter when UCLA was closed for the summer or the winter. And then after I graduated UCLA, when the children's school were closed. For summer, winter, I was always in India. So I'm there June to August. And Mr. and Mrs. Iyer released. And I remember being in PVR Delhi, coming out of the theater, calling Apurna Mashi, and I said, can you give me Konkona's number right away? Because I just found that as a 20-year-old, she played like a person in the late 30s, Tamilian woman, so brilliantly. She got the body language and the accent and every nuance of an older Tamilian woman brilliantly. And so I was like, yeah, you were right. Took me a year, but can I have a number? And then I still needed to audition her. I still, felt like, I still need to audition her. And she was, young and new, and she agreed to an audition. And she nailed it in the audition. And I was really excited to have her. So I jumped to that. I was telling you on the money front that the first money I got for this film, in the middle, that's my Mashi, Brinda Karat. And the role of the Dida is played, this is the mother of Mala Hashmi, who used to be married to Safdar Hashmi. So Safdar Hashmi is somebody I hugely looked up to and was influenced by also in the 1970s, early 1980s. He was killed in the 1980s by Congress goons while he was performing a street play called Halla Bol. Dida is his mother-in-law. Brinda is my Mashi, and my mother said that she is the brilliant actor of this family. She went to London. Everything's about London. Somehow it's coming to that. She went to London to study in the London School of Drama, or RADA or whatever, and became a communist instead. And she came back as a communist instead of as an actor. But my mother, who was an actor herself, said, but she's the real talented one. So when I was cast, when Apurna Mashi said no, and I was thinking about it, and I cast her. I just felt she would be great. But I'm just coming to this point and running away from it, which is on the money. It was so hard to raise money for a film like Amu. First monies actually came from the children. So Vivan gave me $1, which was his tooth fairy money. By then he was 2 years old. And Ishan was 6 at the time. And he had $10 of his pocket money saved. And he gave me $10.
Oh.
Yes. So the first $11 of this film came from my children.
Amazing. But also, you've spoken so interestingly about casting Konkona, but with the rest of your crew, and also in those family scenes, which are so real, they're real people. They're not all actors, I imagine. So you had some real life family.
My Shashuri is in it, and my Nonod is in it, and so Mone Pore Ruby Rai, that song, that because I grew up with that song being sung and everyone dancing, and so they were just doing it. And so it was very organic in the sense that there were real people mixed with the actors. And even the actors, I did a lot of workshops with them. They're theater actors who are playing the Bengali family, the Mama Maima and all that. Did a lot of workshops with them to get them all comfortable. And and to fall in with this ambience, which I discovered in my Shoshur Bari.
Right, right. So there's also this business of writing history in your own way, because there is a scene in the film where they're looking for information on the Sikh riots, anti-Sikh riots, and there's really nothing available. There are no books in the library. So in a way, that history was really not visible or not easily accessible. And your film took a take on that, brought that story through a human story to us. So
Yeah, my political science and history professors, whenever I say that, like I'm so sorry, I really feel bad, like I should have, they were like, oh, thank God this happened to you, that you didn't end up being a teacher like us and you ended up making film, because you're teaching through your film. You're really teaching through your film. You're telling history and politics through your film. And
yeah.
that was a huge compliment for me from them.
Yeah, yeah. And that's quite evident, in the manner in which you've chosen your subjects. And before I come to Margarita, it's also a journey through your life. So there's a biggish gap between Amu and Margarita. And certain things happened in your life. You had very difficult holes in your life to really deal with at that point. And you also came to this story because it was a real life story. It was somebody whom you'd witnessed at close quarters. She's your cousin. Uh, what exactly was working in your mind when you decided that, yes, I'm going to tell her story? Because your stories are also about narratives which we have not had access to before on cinema.
Right. So before I made Margarita, I co-produced and co-wrote Chittagong with my ex-husband.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
but just before Chittagong, I had gone to, I used to always stop over in London, because my Malini, who's like my sister, she's my first cousin, she was studying and then working in London, and so I used to always stop over and then go on to India. And so Malini, who's acutely disabled, but she's a big drinker. So we met in a pub, and she always outdrank me. So even in Bombay, when we were young, like we'd go out, and especially in Bombay, because in the West they're way more polite and they won't react like that. But I remember this so clearly in Bombay once, and so I gave, like, she had a plastic sippy cup, because that's all for the disabled. You don't have really elegant cocktail glasses that they can hold, unfortunately. So it is like a children's sippy cup. With her straw. So I gave it to the waiter and I said, isme whiskey soda or mere liye nimbu pani. And he just looked at me just shocked. And like it was so judgmental. And he just couldn't believe that I'm giving this disabled person a whiskey soda. And I was because the thing is that they are infantilized. That is the assumption, that man's reaction is the assumption that when you're in a wheelchair and you can't speak clearly, people also speak to you like this, because they somehow feel you also can't hear. And there's so many things and myths that go on, right? So or they'll never directly talk to the disabled person. They'll ask me that, acha wo aur khana lege, will she take sugar in her tea? They won't say, will you have sugar in your tea? It's always the case with the disabled. So anyway, here we are, we meet in this London pub, and Malini's out drinking me as usual. And then, I was 40, she was 39. And I said, what do you want for your 40th birthday? It's the best birthday ever. I say this before turning 50. Many of you are my age. At 50, of course, beats 40. Oh my God, just turned 55 and that's even better. But at that time, 40 was this deliciousness after the garbage of the 30s and even worse 20s. 40 was like amazing for me. So I said, what do you want for your 40th birthday? And so sometimes Malini, who normally you wouldn't be able to even understand, but when she gets angry or when she's excited, it can come out clearly. So she sort of slammed down her drink on the table and said, I just want to have sex. And it came out really loud, and the whole pub just turned and looked at us like that. And I got such a start, and I was just like, wow. And I realized that I hadn't thought for the longest time about my sister's sexuality. I recalled that as a teenager, because as I said, from Kolkata I had come to Bombay, and she lived in Bombay. So we grew up as teenagers together. I've gone to Holiday Inn disco and had huge fights because they wouldn't let her dance with her crutches as a 15-year-old, etc. Like, I've just lain down there and said, no, my sister will dance. And all this I've done growing up with Malini, because we moved when I was 14. So 14 to 18 being in Bombay with her. and uh, and the thing is that I was really conscious that I can't date because she won't be able to date, and she was buried in Mills and Boons. I also used to read Mills and Boons, but she was fully buried in them, fully in them. And so I was like, she's such a romantic, and she's just going to be so sad because we were just a year apart. Otherwise, everything, whatever Shonali did, Malini, it was always Shonali, Malini, Shonali, I learned swimming, she learned swimming. Everything we did together, even though she was disabled. The family treated us totally equally, which the converse of that is that she was never given more status as a disabled person in the family. It was never that there was favoritism towards her, which can often happen in other families with a disabled person. In my
Yeah.
family, it was never the case that like give her the bigger piece of chocolate, or let her have the better present. Nothing. There was nothing. We were totally treated equal, which is why I cannot look at a person who's disabled with pity or with any condescension. Like, they are equal to me. I don't put them on a pedestal, and I don't look down on them or look up at them. And that's really important. That was something that I wanted to bring through Margarita with a Straw, having an equal gaze, an equal relationship with somebody who's disabled, and not to infantilize them. So Malini said that, and I realized that as a teenager, I was so conscious that I didn't date. But now, as we grew older, and she was in London and I was in LA, I was like, I'd forgotten about that. I'd forgotten about her sexuality, her desire to also be loved and experience physical sensations. And so I was like, this is something so important. We never think about the sexuality of the disabled. So that was the germ of Margarita with a Straw, that conversation with Malini. And then other than that, I think it is really my attitude towards it, because having grown up with somebody disabled, as I said, my egalitarian attitude towards it, that I was determined to bring through in the film. Like, I didn't want you to pity the person. I wanted you to identify with them. And that shapes the character you form. And so I made a grey character. I made a character who breaks the heart several times of people. When she wants to experience kissing, she kisses her friend Dhruv, and then here's Nima, cute looking boy who's the lead rock singer, and immediately she drops Dhruv for this boy when she thinks that maybe he likes her. And then when she's with Khanum, then this cute white boy Jared comes along, and she cheats on Khanum. And so many people have asked me that, like, why did you have her cheat and things like that? And I was like, hello, first, number one, she's 19 years old, and these words are really big, these words cheat, etc. Like this whole thing of the rules of our sexuality, that's the whole thing I can hold forth on God, anyway. And so I was just like, she's a young person exploring her sexuality. And then she said the truth to Khanum, and I think that's really important, that she had the courage finally, on discovering that her mother had cancer, that I just want to come clean. And she comes clean to Khanum, and that took courage. And but basically, when I was shaping the character, what was important for me is that she is not on a pedestal. She's not this angelic, amazing, perfect person. Like, usually the disabled are portrayed like amazing beings, or they're portrayed as people who triumph physical things, right? So, oh, you're on crutches, but you win some Olympics thing, or, you do that. I just wanted her to be an ordinary person who fools around, who wants to have romance, who can be silly, and who does silly things, and then in the end finds herself. Because throughout the film, she didn't have herself. She wanted affirmation from society, from those she loved. And I felt this was directly my own experience. And for me, like for her, she's only in her early, teenager. I was in my 40s. And really, I would say my son Ishan's death was like a huge, I mean, it just made it race for me, this journey within myself of really learning to love and accept myself, to embrace every gray part of myself, to embrace every bad thing I would have done. I've cheated, I've done this, I've done that, like to embrace every part of myself and forgive myself and love myself. And then be able to then be just so happy, because when you do that, then you can go out on a date with yourself and raise a toast to yourself. You really can. And so that ending of Margarita is so personal. That is really my journey of from seeking external affirmation to affirming myself and learning to love and accept myself. So it doesn't matter if you're disabled or you are, doing well in your career as I was doing well in my career. I think that journey, that inward journey, is something that is not often talked about and not looked at. And that is the underlying thing that I wanted to bring out also through Margarita with a Straw.
Yeah. Somewhere the story is Malini's, but then it becomes Shonali's. That's the sort of
Only,
sense you get.
when that happened. So you see, I had written 10 drafts, and in those 10 drafts, Laila was straight. She was a straight girl, and
Yeah.
this character Khanum hit on her, and she was like, "No, I'm not gay," and that's it. And Khanum just remained as an inspiring character in the film, but there's no love interest between them whatsoever. It was only these guys. And so I was writing my 11th draft or something, and I think it was somebody at Sundance. So yeah, the script had gone to the Sundance lab, and yes, I've even put him in the film. So one of my mentors, he plays the professor in the film. He had written Che Guevara's The Motorcycle Diaries.
Uh-huh.
Jose Rivera, very well known screenwriter, and and so he plays the professor in as an ode, because he was the person who set me on this path. I cast him in the film. He said, there's something different between this script and Amu. Like Amu, even though it was on such a political subject, like it felt really personal. Like it felt like a really personal film. And the way your script is, it's feeling distant. And he couldn't identify what to do or what it was, but he made this one remark. So when I was writing my 11th draft, after hearing that, I just sort of put myself into Laila's skin. And I realized, and then I was writing. Okay, so then I reached the part where Khanum hits on her. And Khanum hits on her. And then I'm writing. And this is something you always hope that can happen to you as a writer, that your character speaks to you. So my character, Laila, speaks to me and said, I don't want to say that to her. I don't want to say I'm straight. I want to try it out. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is what happens, that, I've grown to this place as a writer, that my character is speaking to me from the pages. This is what you want. But actually, it was Shonali speaking to Shonali, because essentially, when I became Laila, I went to my own history. And I was, in fact, 19 years old. In my second year at Miranda House College, this woman had come from Berkeley. And I fell madly in love with her. Until that point, I had no idea. Actually, I was so innocent and naive, even though I'm from Loreto House. I had crushes on so many girls in Loreto. I had such a lack of self-awareness. Devika Padgaonkar. Oh, I don't know, guys, if you remember. Devika Padgaonkar. Paddy, we called her. Oh, my God. I don't know if Shumana's on this call either. We used to walk down the stairs and we'd see Paddy, and I would just like fall dramatically on the stairs and hold my heart because Paddy walked by. But never thinking that, oh, I might be gay. Like this lack of self-awareness astonishes me. I don't know if other chicks were like this, or I was like this in Loreto, or my little gang, we were so sheltered. I don't know. If they're all there, I would love to hear from them in the Q&A. I had no self-awareness. So I reached Miranda House, second year Miranda House, when I fall in love with this person. And for the first time, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I have some different sexuality. So, and the interesting thing is that even though I wasn't really educated on this, like I just went with the flow of my feelings and was in this deep relationship with this person. And so when I'm writing the script then as Laila, I'm like, heck no, she's bisexual for sure. She's going to be bisexual. So you're exactly right. I basically took it back from Malini. So it was at a distance because I was writing Malini's story. And then when I owned it and it became mine, and I think that ownership happened one step earlier because the first 10 drafts were also written before Ishan's death. He died while I was in the middle of doing this, of writing this, and I immediately had to kill the mother. And that's when I realized that it's now more my story. Like Malini hasn't lost her mother, thank God. My Pishi, I'm devoted to her. She's amazing. She's like my second mother. But I had lost my mother. But I think this was about Ishan for me. It was about that deep loss that it was so fresh. Like I was writing the script and Ishan died. And in fact, a beautiful moment I had with Ishan was, so he died when he was 16. And so the younger one, Vivan, was 12. So at this point, I know you have two boys too. 12 and 16, there's, quite a bit of difference in a certain way. So I used to enjoy doing this little adult lunches every weekend with Ishan. Only he and I would go every Saturday for lunch. So we were out at lunch, and he said, Mama, so what's your next film and all that? And so, because he loved Amu, he was such a big fan of Amu, so sweet. So in fact, there's a scene in the behind the scenes. If anybody has a DVD of Amu, there's a behind the scenes in which Ishan and Vivan are in it. They were 6 and 10 at that point, and I made them perform in the hot sun, this scene, and then it gets cut out, and Vivan was just furious. He was just furious. He's just like, I cannot believe you just cut that out of the movie. I'll just never do anything for any of your movies again. And Ishan said, Mama, will it be on the DVD? I said, it'll be on the DVD. He's like, okay, that's cool. Anyway, so now cut to, he's 16, 6 years later, and he's like, what's your next film and all that. Big supporter also of his father's Chittagong. So I said, well, it's just, it's inspired by your aunt Malini, and it's called I Have Me. And I said, I'm calling it I Have Me because I feel I have me for the first time in my life. And I was at that time, I was 45 when Ishan died. And this was literally a few months before his death. And I said, I feel I have me for the first time in my life. I feel all my life I was searching for something else, but I didn't have me. I did not have myself. I did not have myself to turn to. I would turn to my mother or my sister or my aunts or my best friends, not to myself. Do you understand what I mean? And I was looking deep into his eyes, and he looked back deep into my eyes and he said, Mama, I totally get it because I have me too. And so that was so beautiful. So in fact, the working title of the film was I Have Me till the longest time. And then I came up with Margarita with a Straw. And so Ishan is so tied up with Margarita with a Straw as well. And so definitely, I think, that film is deeply personal, deeply personal.
Yes, a film about disability and queerness. You sort of really had a double whammy there, because for a lot of people, just dealing with a disabled or a specially abled protagonist is enough to deal with. And then you have her getting very adventurous with her sexuality. So that brought in a lot. And it also set stories, again, apart from Fire, we really didn't have any other lesbian suggestion of a story on cinema. So it was really, really important for a lot of people who are now finding it easier to tell their stories. We've been through those decades when we had closeted friends who've suffered miserably and agonized over why they can't come out and be normalized. So they are non-normative, your stories. And over here, you really layered it up. But, this could go on for hours with you, but we have to now move to The Sky is Pink. And I'd love you to tell us what your concept is about everyone having their own sky, and we can have our own colors. Today, the London sky is brilliant blue. It is clear. It's glorious. What's your sky saying in Bombay?
Well, there've been a lot of pink sunsets, I must say. I mean, people, what
I
I love,
know, the sky has been glorious.
It has been. I mean, COVID has led to a lot of spectacular skies for sure. The environment has improved, and people keep sending me beautiful sky pictures. I love that I get to get beautiful sunsets from people from all over the world, actually. And for me, I think that was the most important part of the underlying theme of The Sky is Pink, and hence the title is that. In a way, that's sort of also connected with I Have Me and Margarita with a Straw, that whole thing again of your self-love and your self-work, and you having limitless horizons then. Like the moment you turn to yourself and love yourself, you can just expand, and nothing can scare you, not even death. And I think that for you then yourself, like your sky can be whatever you want it to be. Because I think you're always, especially of course as a girl, people are limited constantly and controlled as to what their lives can be. And I think it's important that your sky should be your skies, that whether it's sexuality and disability or that you're going to die young or whatever it is in your life, you paint your sky, because you have our lives, even if we live whatever we live, like it is actually a short life, right? It is. And it should be meaningful to you. It should not be about pleasing your parents, pleasing your husband, pleasing your children, pleasing society, pleasing the media. Are you pleasing yourself? That is why, in a certain sense, The Sky is Pink is an extension of Margarita. Loving and accepting yourself and making your life, your sky, painting your sky, as well as putting what your sky is, yourself. What do you want from life? It could be like, I'll give you an example. As a parent, my son Vivan, he's just hugely brilliant. His father's IIT topper of the country, and he's a NASA scientist, and he's got the brains from his father, and he has the writing from me. He's a brilliant writer. He can be anything. He he doesn't want to do anything. He's an organized, as in the sense, by quote unquote anything what society would say. That is, you go to a top college, you have a top job, you do whatever, even if it's in the social sector, like, like my family, my aunts form the first disability center. Everybody's like the first NDTV, like there are all these things. He doesn't have those aspirations. His is that he's just like, I'll be a waiter. And he's like, I'll be a waiter. And for me, that's amazing. I was just like,
Yeah.
you are so in your own skin that you don't care. Like, I cared so much about what people will think and what I'll do and what will my career be, that he just wants to organize people. And he may not earn by organizing people. Like right now, he's hugely in the BLM movement, etc. But whatever he'll organize, and he wants to organize illegal immigrants, whatever he wants to do. And he feels he'll support himself by being a waiter. He could go to do top things in science and filmmaking and all kinds of things. Anytime I write a script, he has to edit it for me. But I love that his sky is just something so unusual in a family that is a first in many things, and people are well known and all kinds of things from his grandparents, aunts, uncles. It's a lot of pressure. No. And that's what I love. And that's what I think is so important, that we need to not put pressure on our kids. Our kids need to not put pressure on themselves. And we need to not feel that we have to be something, especially as women in our 50s, to please other people. It's your life, so it should be your sky. So paint your sky whatever color you want to paint it.
So true. I'm sure your son's going to surprise you even further, because your
I hope
uncle
he
started
has
NDTV when he was
unconventional.
40.
But I
So
want him to surprise me in continuing to be unconventional and just like himself.
yeah. So how did the story come to you? The Sky is Pink, or Aisha's story?
So January 2017, I think, I'm forgetting the dates now, when it would have been. Let's see, we released 2015. Anyway, sometime, 2015 January, we released in that year, I think. So Aisha in January watches the trailer of Margarita with a Straw. Amir Khan released it in a huge way. So the trailer was really out there, and she watched it 30 times, I believe, and told her parents, I hope I live to see this film. And she died 2 weeks later. So it remained her dying wish to watch Margarita with a Straw. And 4 months later, it released in theaters. Her parents, Aditi and Nirain, watched it and they really loved it. And they saw that at the end, it was dedicated to my son, the filmmaker's son, Ishan. And so, their son's name is Ishan also. It's just amazing. So then it took them 6 months to track me down. Then I got an email. Then we got on the call. And I heard all this. And they said, like, do you feel you would, do you think you could? And blah, blah, it came out like that. I was just like, yeah, I would actually love to write a script about the loss of a child, because I am at that stage where I want to explore through cinema the loss of a child and what parents go through. So, and for me, it's a positive experience. And for them, it was very, very sad. So it's not fully their take in the film. Aditi did not wear vibrant colors at her daughter's funeral. I wore them at my son's funeral. And, for those of you who've seen Sky is Pink, I think it's a shock to the audience when it happens. But then I hope people understand what I'm doing when I just play this party music at the funeral, right? So you're just at the house and there's this long shot, and Priyanka's by the pool and she's crying and she's sad. And then we suddenly cut to the funeral and she's in this vibrant outfit. Actually, it's my personal pink shawl she's wearing. And we cut to this party music. And for me, funerals are parties. Funerals are like birthdays. And, death days are like birthdays. And that is the philosophy I wanted to bring out through The Sky is Pink. That the day you pass away, anybody passes away, even if it's a child, it is something to be celebrated.
I think it's amazing, that you're able to say this, and I'd love to know what our audience are thinking. There are lots of questions and comments fleeting in, but I think you're actually empowering them with your story and inspiring them, because you have to be at a certain stage of evolution to look at death and to look at the most extreme form of loss, the loss of a child, the way you are able to do it now. It's in a way liberated you. So I feel it's almost like a spiritual experience that you've been through. And also you have a connect with the boy. You still talk to Ishan.
Oh my God.
It's amazing. And this belief that, yes, they're still there with us. I feel this constantly, all the time, that they are here, right here. And sometimes that presence manifests in physical things happening, like a little book dropping, or you're looking for something and you open a page and it's right there for you. It's bizarre. These are like gifts, or what responses, I don't know, but I think these are experiences which keep assuring you that there are people around you. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
Ishan,
love
of
around.
course. I mean, yeah, as you know, those many of you read my Facebook posts, but just in connection with Sky is Pink, it was on his birthday because he actually on the birthday and death day and my birthday, I always get gifts. So on his birthday, I got the call. I was in LA from Priyanka, a message from Sid Roy Kapoor, my producer, saying Priyanka wants you to fly to New York. She loved the script, and I immediately knew because I had just woken up and it was Ishan's birthday, and I got this message. It's the first thing that happened in the day. And then the world premiere of The Sky is Pink. So the Toronto Film Festival, one of the major festivals in the world. So it's such an honor and privilege to have your film there. It's a 2-week festival. So it could have been any date that they chose to have the world premiere. And I get this email from the head, Cameron Bailey, who says that, we'd love to have the film, and we would like to play it on September 13th. It's going to be a gala. It's going to be the only Asian gala in our festival on September 13th. And that is Ishan's death day. So, it started on his birthday with Priyanka saying yes, which is what made the film happen. And the world premiere was on his death day. So for me, those are not coincidences. Like those, I know that my kiddo is up there just, giving me the signs that he's with me in a big way.
Amazing. Amazing. Lots of love to you. I'm going to open up the questions because we're really going over time. Okay. There's a question from Nabonita who says, each of your films so far have been based on real events and on real people. Would you like to work on pure fiction?
I have just written 2 scripts during COVID. I've been extremely productive to my, it's so amazing because it's not an easy time to be so productive. I've written 2 scripts. Both are fictional. So one is an out and out commercial blockbuster film. It's 3 badass women. And, it's not based on any real life at all. It's very Bollywood film, but they're badass women. And so I love that. So, that's in talks. And the other is a art house type film based on an author's book called The Spaces Between Us and the Secrets Between Us by an author, Triti Umrigar, and which I was saying, which is the relationship of a woman and her staff person. So I think for the first time, I'm going to actually be doing 2 entirely fictional films.
I'm going to put a few questions together. There's Debashish Das who's asking, you've worked with some difficult stories. How do you keep the creativity alive without getting down into the emotional weight of the plots? And Jannavi is also asking that you deal with such difficult topics like death so beautifully on celluloid. How do you do this?
Well, that answer should come to you just the way I'm talking in this interview about death, because death is a beautiful thing for me. So it's not something I'm afraid of. And that changed after my son's death. So when my mother died, because I was actually only 21 when she died, it was a huge tragedy for me and I was unable to really deal with it. And it took me 25 years. So 25 years later, my son died. And it took my son's death for me to be able to have this really marvelous friendship and joy with death. And so that's why it's so easy. Like, it's not difficult. I know it's difficult because for most people, death is still difficult, sadly. But for me, it completely isn't. And so the funny thing is that in directing Sky is Pink, to give you an example, like on the death day, so Aisha's death day, so Zaira Wasim, Farhan, Priyanka, Rohit, who's playing Ishan, as well as my crew, everybody was crying on that day. And I was laughing and joyous, thank God, because had I also been crying, like, we wouldn't have been able to get that scene. And it is such a beautiful scene in the film. But, people think that if you're crying in real life, then crying in front of camera is the same thing. It's not. If an actor is crying and they're unable to sort of get a hold of themselves, they're not going to be able to give performance in front of camera, because that requires a lot of concentration. It's not just a simple matter, because tears have to come at a certain point in the performance. You have to be a certain way. You have to be in control, really. It's not the same thing that, I'm sad off camera, so I'll easily be able to be sad in front of camera. And so because I had this joy and strength, and I just spent time with each of them, and just transferred my joy, and heard them out, and just with each of them. And I had spent by that time a lot of time with them, and I knew what what's going on with all of them, including my director of photography, who was sad about his father's death. And so being able to give that love and strength to everybody, to be able to pull off that scene, which was sad for everybody else, but not sad for me. So it
Right.
really wasn't. People have felt Sky Spring must have been cathartic. For me, it was the opposite of cathartic. I think something is cathartic in art if you don't deal with it in your real life. If you don't deal with pain in real life, then your art is a secondary way of accessing your pain. When Ishan died, I took my pain, I sat with it, I gave myself, I called it basically grief work. And for a minimum of 1 hour, by the clock, if not 2 hours, I spent time with my pain. And that means taking the darkest thoughts. Why did he have to die? Why did he die like this? Why couldn't I prevent the death? Whatever the darkest, most difficult thoughts are, let them rise up and not feel scared by them, and not try to divert, because usually we try to divert from difficult, painful feelings and thoughts. In what way? We meditate. I'm saying in the good ways. There's the bad ways of drugs and alcohol, and the good ways are meditation and, reading something soothing and listening to music. But that's still diversion. And I just would not let myself be diverted. I just would fiercely sit with the feelings. You just take the feelings and you sit with them. And if you are able to do that, you transcend it. So I was fully in transcendence by the time I was making Sky is Pink, and which is why it was really sheer joy to make this movie. Like, there was not a moment of sadness for me.
Yeah. That comes through actually. The way you deal with the tone of the film. There's just a lot of love and a lot of hope and positivity, as you said. Okay, there's a question about Puljuri Mitra Basu, who's asking you, do you give any freedom to your actors, actresses to make decisions about their acting, their costumes, or do you have complete control?
I fully believe in the freedom of actors, but it is in a relationship of trust. For me, I have an umbilical cord between me and my actors, and that is the key reason that I get the performances I get. And that process starts very early from me, from the very first time I meet them. So, for instance, Priyanka told me much later how the very first time I met her in New York City, and we spent a lot of time, and I actually was talking about Ishan, and I told her so much about my own journey to make this film, Sky is Pink, that, so much to do with Ishan, etc. And she imbibed that. And then in the process that we had, talking about death a lot, her father's death, my experiences with death, those bonds were built and things. So when we were on set, and if she needed to do something different, there is an emotional understanding between us, a deep emotional understanding between us. And if she wants to play with a character and to do something, I'm absolutely open to it. But I also know my characters deeply well, really deeply well. Okay. And so I can observe some, and possibly because I've written them as well. Right? All these 3 films I've written myself. I am able to see if the actor in their playing is going off character, even though they may think they're not going off, or they're staying in the tone of that character. And then I have to find a subtle, gentle way to help them to still be playful and yet to bring them back to what I know. And I know that it's important that I control that this is what the character would react or not react, so that does the character react in a loud way or in a soft way in a situation. Like, so many things, so many small things can come up, and actors may try different things. And that's why you can have multiple takes. You can explore with your actor, so that on the edit table also you have a choice. So you can explore with an actor and let them try out what they want. And I think that's always advisable to do, so that they're not feeling constrained. And then you can also just whisper in their ear that, why don't you try it like this? So to give an example, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind my saying this, in the scene in The Sky is Pink, where Priyanka has a nervous breakdown. So she's lying down next to Farhan, and she gets up, strangling her own self. And in the take that she did first, after discussion with me, in the take she did, she reacted in a way where she was just screaming and yelling. And it was very good acting. There was nothing wrong with her acting. It was terrific acting. But I didn't feel that Aditi would react like that. And I didn't want that scene like that. I wanted her to
Mm.
get up and be strangling herself, but it's really quiet. And so, I had the take in which she did it the way she was very keen to do it. And then I just whispered to her that, I wonder if you want to just give me a take, like, why don't we just try it where you're just whispering, you're literally just whispering. And she was not sure. But because we had such a deep umbilical cord and understanding and trust between us, she trusted me just the way I trusted her. I let her do the take, and she trusted me to do the take the way I wanted. And then that's the beauty of film. It's not theater. You can decide at the edit table. But it's not often that's a rare example where that's two such extreme opposite that my actor does. For the most part, actually, we are completely on the same page. It really happens that in very two opposite ways, the actor wants to do it in one way and the director wants one way. For the most part in my films, it's been more or less in the same way.
Okay.
And really, it's because of that. Sorry, I know I have to be briefer now in my answer.
Yeah, briefer now, but I'll take just two more questions. And
Please
one is
go
from
ahead with Gayatri's
Chandana.
question, because Gayatri is from when I was 5 years old, and I know she has a question.
Gayatri is saying, you are a fan of Bollywood films.
Gayatri Bose. There may be
Gayatri
many
Bose is
Gayatri.
here. You are a fan of Bollywood films. You've used Bollywood stars and newbies in your films, yet your films themselves are not typically Bolly films. Would you be interested in directing pure Bolly films, or do you envisage continue making independent style cinema?
So as I was saying, this one script that I've written that I
Yeah.
can't say more about, unfortunately, but that's deliciously fully Bolly. And I may fall flat on my face trying to make it. But one thing about me is, and I encourage artists who are out there to, have that same thing, is I embrace failure. Like I think you learn the most in life from failure. So even when I was making Amu, and just to correct you about the book thing, by the way, Penguin approached me to write the book after I finished the film. So I wrote the book
Yeah.
in the edit process. But when I was making Amu, I was like, I may not be able to, I don't know, I may not know how to make a film because I've been a full-time mother breastfeeding, but it's okay if I fail. I need to make a film to just know that, can I even make a film? And so I made Amu. And so with this Bollywood film, I may completely suck at it, but I'm okay to be the laughing stock of the world and shit box office and jo bhi ho yaar, kar lo. I'm like, I'm going to go for it full on. So yes, I'm looking forward to that.
How long have you not seen Gayatri?
No, Gayatri, I very much just saw at the Sky is Pink premiere. We were at the bloody premiere, and my sari fell off, and she had to whisk me to the other room and tie my sari, just as she's done her whole life.
Well, talking about sari and your sartorial choices, and a lot of bachas in our team who feel you're uber cool, uber glam. There's a question from Jonaki who says, who dresses you up? Where do you shop from? Because she's very impressed with your style.
Well, with my saris and blouses, with my premiers, actually only with Sky Sping and Margarita. Amu, it was just my own self, but raw mango. So I always turn to raw mango. I know Seanjoy really well, and he's really wonderfully kind. In fact, with the Sky's Pink, all the blouses and saris were for him, because I love raw mango's blouses also. They're so amazing, the blouses. But other than the saris and blouses which are from raw mango, anything else I wear is just my own self.
No, I think she's very, very keen about the black jacket sort of thing you wore when you did your Ink talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's sari. Yeah, that I went. A wonderful gay friend of mine who's a designer in Delhi. Like, I went to his showroom and I picked out that jacket. He helped me pick that out. Yeah.
So you'll have to tell Jonaki privately where to go and shop.
Okay.
And there's another question from Chandana, who actually snowballed this whole Loreto and school circuit. She asks, all three of your movies are about celebration and acceptance of life. Do you have a specific intent or a message for your viewers when you make the films?
So I think each of them had their own, right? And I think then as I'm making them, I'm really conscious that I know my message, and then that I have to really bury it. And I'm really conscious that I hate films in which it's really apparent what the message is, that it's a message-driven film. So in Amu, I knew very clearly that I need the audience to understand that this was a genocide. This was not a Hindu-Sikh riot.
Right.
Simple one sentence, and now I have to make a film. And so then I have to make really complex characters, wonderful narrative, like lots of drama, so that people are drawn into the story. And then you can sneak in your politics in that way. So in Margarita with a Straw, as I said, you need to look at Laila as an equal. And everybody who came out of that film really felt that, wow, like, we didn't pity her. We didn't, that is the main thing that came out. People didn't feel they had pity, and so it's just like, don't pity the person, they are another complex person who have their sexuality just as you do. And with Sky Spring, death days are like birthdays, or paint your sky whatever color. And so those are the things. But then as you're writing it, is really important that you then put that aside and you get into making a complex narrative, because otherwise it's just simplistic and on the nose.
In fact, Shubhankar sent a question asking, you'd announced during the premiere of Margarita that you were going to adopt a novel. And are you still doing that?
Adopt a novel.
You like adapt a novel to a screenplay, or you in the process of writing it? I'm not sure, but he's asking you about that. Are you in the process of adapting a literary piece?
But right now, as I said, Sriti Umrigar's books, The Secrets Between Us and The Space Between Us. But that, if I was doing something after Margarita, I've forgotten.
Okay.
Right now, this has literally just come to me during COVID, so he couldn't be knowing about it. You're the first people publicly that I'm speaking about these two books.
Okay.
Things keep coming.
Good luck with these new projects.
Yeah,
we are way beyond time. We've taken your time too, but as I said, we could have gone on happily for another hour.
I swear, Sangeeta, I don't feel like stopping. It just feels like, just chit-chatting with my girlfriend. It's so lovely. Yeah.
It's absolutely lovely. And somehow I knew it would be this way.
But I just feel I spoke utterly inarticulately, and I just realized that I would just go on tangents and go off things. I hope people understood.
No, at some point, if you have even 15 minutes, come into this page and see the sort of comments which have all come in about somebody being completely awestruck, somebody saying awesome, somebody saying so inspiring. I mean, it's just people who've been responding spontaneously to what you've said. So
I want to just
remarkable.
I just want to give my email. I want to share my email with all our listeners today. Shonali Bose, spelled with an H. Sangeeta spelled it without the H, because this is what Bengalis do. Because just because we have Talibe Shaw, Donte Shaw, and Petkata Shaw, Bengalis feel that in English there's no need for an H. But I spell SH. Okay. So Shonali, SHONALIBOSE at hotmail.com. I would love to hear from you, since the frustration of the Zoom thing is that it's not a live audience. I can't see you guys. I would love for you to email me. I'm very prompt. I always reply, and I'd love to get in conversation with any of you who've been listening today, including Jonaki and anybody else.
So all of you have a direct line to Shonali now, and it's time to say thank you on behalf of everybody, Shonali. This was delightful. I have to thank Carrie, Ashanti, everyone else at the London Indian Film Festival who've been our partners, to Munch and to Sangeet Foundation. So there's been a diverse and a large audience for you today. And I'm absolutely so pleased, so pleased. Someday we'll sit in your Bandra flat and chat more.
And in your house. In Kolkata also, because I come to Kolkata just to eat puchkas. So for sure.
Yeah. Somewhere you wrote you used to have 50 puchkas?
Yeah, when I was in Loreto, but not now. 20 now.
Well, that's amazing. That's another bonding. That's another bonding. I'm going to end here, guys, saying thank you to Shonali. Thank you to all of you here, Shonali's childhood friends who probably made her, be so relaxed and so confiding in many ways. And we're going to end with an announcement of our next event. As you know, we have My Life, My Art, which is the conversation series, Shonali. We also have the Connect Digital Art Festival, which I started in April during the times of COVID, just to bring artists together, because, there's been a complete loss of income and a loss of performance spaces, people really missing the stage, people, it not just affecting bodies, but affecting mental health. So we brought people together and had 5 editions of the Connect Digital Festival. And next week, no, really, in another 10 days, on the 2nd, 12th and 13th of August, we have the special monsoon edit. So we're going to celebrate the rains and have some very beautiful music, dance, and poetry around it. if we can have the poster for that and bring the session to a close. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Much. Thank
Marvelous.
you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.